Hey, what's up, guys? So, we have some very interesting news to go over when it comes to Naughty Dog. And so, the first topic is having to do with Uncharted. So, reading from PlayStation Universe, the headline reads Naughty Dog describes itself as having moved on from Uncharted. Neil Druckmann, the co president of Naughty Dog, has described the Sony owned studio as having moved on from the Uncharted franchise, despite noting that Uncharted 4 Thief's End was one of its biggest selling games ever. Speaking with BuzzFeed, Druckmann, who also headed up the Last of Us franchise at Naughty Dog, said there isn't any pressure from Sony for the company to develop sequels to its biggest selling games, and as such, this is why Naughty Dog were able to walk away from Uncharted. Quote, they, Sony, have supported us every step of the way to follow our passions, meaning that just because something is successful, people think there's all this pressure and we have to make a sequel. That's not the case. For us, Uncharted was insanely successful. Uncharted 4 was one of our best-selling games, and we're able to put our final brushstroke on that story and say that we're done. We're moving on, unquote. Despite Druckmann seemingly closing the book on any future Uncharted games, it's unlikely that Sony will want to lay the franchise to rest. Indeed, it appears the series may be making a comeback at another studio. And so yeah, guys, this is very big news because this isn't a rumor, this is confirmation that Naughty Dog is done with Uncharted. I know I never thought I would say that, but I mean, all good things have to come to an end at some point, right? I feel like I've kind of been in the minority with this opinion, but I've always thought for the longest time since I beat Uncharted 4, I think the ending to Uncharted 4 is perfect, and the way they wrapped up Nathan Drake's story to me is perfect. I never wanted another Uncharted game. Like whenever everyone made videos talking about, speculating what does the future of Naughty Dog look like, and people always brought up like, oh, are they going to make an Uncharted 5? And I always said, and I stuck to this, and you guys will know this, I've always said that I wouldn't be totally against the idea of like a new Uncharted from Naughty Dog, but I always said, in my opinion, they wrapped up the series perfectly. They should never touch this series ever again. Now, does this mean that there will never be another Uncharted game ever? Of course not. I fully expect some other studio to probably reboot Uncharted, and maybe Naughty Dog will kind of, watch from the sidelines, maybe give some advice on how they made Uncharted. But as far as like Naughty Dog fully making another Uncharted, it is officially over. Naughty Dog is moving on to other things, and yeah, I mean, it is kind of sad at the same time because, one of the most beloved franchises, at least for in PlayStation's history, is coming to a close from their best developer. So it is kind of bittersweet, but at the same time, I'm glad this came out. And also during this interview, Neil said that when it comes to them feeling the pressure and being forced by Sony to make sequels to their best-selling games, Neil's coming out and saying that that's not true, and that Sony lets Naughty Dog pretty much do whatever they're passionate about, and that's really great to hear because it would absolutely suck if Sony was like, Naughty Dog, you have to make Uncharted 5. You have to make The Last of Us Part 3, even if you don't want to, because then Naughty Dog's heart wouldn't be in it. Naughty Dog is the best developer, in my opinion, in all of gaming for a reason, because they make games that they truly want to make, and you can tell because the attention to detail in whether it's Uncharted or Last of Us, you can tell that everyone that touched the game put in all their love, effort, blood, sweat, and tears, and there's a reason why Naughty Dog is so beloved, because they actually care about the games they're making. So it's nice hearing that, just because a certain franchise is successful, Sony doesn't really force their developers to make sequels. And so yeah, guys, this is some very big news coming from Naughty Dog, and more specifically Neil Druckmann, about them ending Uncharted. And so yeah, guys, what do you think? Down below, let me know your thoughts on Neil Druckmann coming out and officially confirming that Naughty Dog is officially done with the Uncharted series. Now, moving on to probably an even bigger topic when it comes to Naughty Dog. This is about how The Last of Us Part 3 is not a guarantee. And so, once again, reading from PlayStation Universe, the headline reads, The Last of Us Part 3 is not guaranteed, as Naughty Dog says it's up to us whether we want to continue it or not. Rumors of The Last of Us Part 3 have been doing the rounds for a couple of months now, but Naughty Dog has admitted it can move on from the franchise without making a third installment in the critically acclaimed franchise if it feels inclined to do so. Speaking with BuzzFeed, Neil Druckmann said that The Last of Us Part 3 will be made if there's something worth telling in the story, making it clear nothing has been set in stone yet. Quote, I know there's a bunch of people wondering about The Last of Us Part 3 and whether that will be a thing or not. All I can say is, at Naughty Dog, we're very, very privileged that our publisher is Sony, which means Sony funds our games, supports us, and we're owned by Sony. Our process is the same thing we did when we did Part 2, which is, if we can come up with a compelling story that has this universal message and statement about love, just like the first and second game did, then we will tell that story. If we can't come up with something, we have a very strong ending with Part 2, and that will be the end, unquote. And so yeah, guys, there is not a guarantee that The Last of Us Part 3 will ever happen. Now, as you guys know, I am a massive fan of The Last of Us. The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 are my two favorite games of all time. And I feel very comfortable in saying they will never be surpassed. To me, it's literally impossible. These two games, me saying that they're flawless and perfection is not doing it justice. From this same interview back when Neil was talking about how they're done with Uncharted, he's also saying that there might not be a Last of Us Part 3 if they can't come up with a story that needs to be told. And Neil is saying that back whenever they were thinking about making a sequel to The Last of Us, they were, they almost didn't do it because if they couldn't come up with a story that needed to be told, then they wouldn't have done it. And it seems like Neil's saying that's their same mindset for The Last of Us Part 3. They're not just going to make a Part 3, just because it's a successful IP and they want to make more money and stuff. Neil's coming out and saying, like, I'm sorry guys, but if we can't come up with a compelling story that's just as good as the first two games, then we're just not going to make Part 3, and they'll just end the franchise with Part 2. Obviously, besides the online game that's separate, but as far as like single player, they might end it with Part 2. And honestly, let's think about that for a moment. So let's say The Last of Us Part 3 never happens, and so The Last of Us ends with Part 2. Me personally, even though that's not what I would prefer, I genuinely believe they have one more story to tell. I feel like Neil and them can come up with something for Part 3. I feel like it'll probably involve Abby and Lev. But if, let's say, they can't and they just literally end it with Part 2, it wouldn't be the end of the world, because I feel like Part 2's ending is absolutely perfect. And if that ends up being how they end this series, I kind of feel like it's a perfect ending. I know a lot of people feel like the ending for Part 2 was bad and it was very depressing. And it was kind of depressing, but I feel like there was also a little bit of hope left. For those of you who are fans of The Last of Us and been, up to date with Naughty Dog for years now, back whenever they were doing marketing for Part 2, when Neil was on stage, he was talking about how, he tried to make, when they were brainstorming for Part 2, he was trying to make new characters and like change it up a little bit, but he always kept going back to Joel and Ellie. Like, to him, he doesn't see The Last of Us, like The Last of Us is Joel and Ellie. Now, if they do Part 3, that's not going to be, like, they can't do that because Joel's dead, and in my opinion, it wouldn't make sense to bring Ellie back for Part 3. So I feel like they do have one more story to tell, and this is not, even though, don't get me wrong guys, even though this is my favorite franchise of all time, like in anything, I do not want like 4, 5, 6, 7 Last of Us games. Like, at the most, I would want just one more game and that would be it. And so yeah guys, as of right now, we still don't know what they're working on. Based off of these quotes from Neil Druckmann, if we take him for his word, it does sound like even if they are going to make Part 3, which I fully believe they will at some point, it seems like they haven't even started on it, because Neil's saying that if they can come up with a story that's good enough, then they'll make it, but Neil could be lying. Like, they could have started working on Part 3 as soon as Part 2 shipped. I mean, we have no idea. Obviously, they were making the Last of Us Online game, and my prediction is that they'll probably do a new IP, and then just like they closed out the PS4 generation, I feel like they will close out the PS5 generation, probably with The Last of Us Part 3. And so yeah guys, what do you think down below? Let me know your thoughts on Neil Druckmann's comments, pretty much saying that there's no guarantee that The Last of Us Part 3 will be a thing if they can't come up with a good enough story. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, drop it a like, and hit the subscribe button by turning on the post notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Until next time guys, take care.